The sound of shattering glass pierced through the bustling dinner rush at the Golden Spoon restaurant, drawing the attention of diners and staff alike. Samantha Morgan, a waitress with a past as bright as her future once seemed, quickly knelt to pick up the broken pieces of what had been a water glass. Her hands trembled slightly as she collected the shards, aware of the burning glare from her manager, Frank, who watched from across the dining room with folded arms and a scowl that had become his permanent expression. "Third one this month, Morgan," he called out loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "Coming out of your check." A few diners glanced up uncomfortably at the public scolding, but most kept their eyes down, pretending not to notice the humiliation playing out beside their meals. Samantha felt heat rise to her cheeks, but said nothing. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when her mother's medication cost more than their rent. "Sorry, Frank. Won't happen again," she said, depositing the glass fragments into a trash bin and quickly returning to her tables. At 27, Samantha's hands bore the calluses and small burns of someone who had spent years in food service, though that had never been her plan. For years earlier, she had been in her second year of medical school, her white coat still crisp, her stethoscope a proud weight around her neck. Top of her class in pediatric studies, her professors had marked her as someone to watch. "Your bedside manner is extraordinary," her advisor had told her. "Children respond to you in a way I've rarely seen." But that life seemed like a distant dream now, one that had vanished the night her mother collapsed in their small apartment. The subsequent diagnosis of multiple sclerosis derailed everything. The medical bills came first, then her mother's inability to work, and finally, Samantha's impossible choice, her education or her mother's care. It wasn't really a choice at all. "Table 12 needs more bread, Samantha. Where's your head today?" Frank's voice cut through her memories. "Coming right up," she called back, grabbing a bread basket and weaving through the crowded restaurant. As the evening wore on, Samantha felt the familiar ache in her lower back intensify. Double shifts had become her norm, noon to closing, 6 days a week. The other waitresses, mostly college students working part-time, didn't need the hours like she did. They didn't have a mother at home who needed help getting from bed to bathroom on bad days. Samantha, Jessica, the newest waitress, approached with a conspiratorial smile. At 19, Jessica viewed waiting tables as a temporary inconvenience before her real life began. "Can you cover my section for 20 minutes? Brad just texted me, and he's outside." Before Samantha could respond, Jessica added, "I'll totally make it up to you. Plus, Frank likes you better anyway." That was a lie, and they both knew it. Frank openly favored the younger waitresses who laughed at his jokes and didn't question the constantly shifting schedule that somehow always gave them the best sections. "I've got my own tables, Jessica, and I've been here since noon," Samantha replied, balancing 3 plates along her arm. Jessica's smile faltered. "Come on, it's just 20 minutes. I covered for you last week when you had to take that call from your mom's doctor." The emotional manipulation was subtle but effective. Samantha had indeed stepped away for 7 minutes, not 20, to speak to her mother's neurologist about a new treatment option, one they couldn't afford. "Fine," Samantha relented. 20 minutes. Not a second more. Jessica bounced away, leaving Samantha with twice the workload. As she rushed between tables, refilling drinks and delivering orders, she caught Frank watching her with narrowed eyes, as if waiting for her to falter. He'd been particularly harsh since she'd questioned the new tip pooling policy that somehow always left her with less than she'd earned. By 9 o'clock, Jessica still hadn't returned, and Samantha's feet throbbed inside her worn-out shoes. She'd been saving for a new pair for 3 months, but each time she got close, something more urgent claimed the money: her mother's prescription, the water heater breaking, the ever-increasing rent on their small apartment. "Tomorrow's schedule is up," Frank announced, pinning a paper to the bulletin board in the break room. Samantha waited until the initial rush of servers checked their hours before approaching. Her heart sank as she scanned the list. Where she normally worked 5 dinner shifts and 2 lunch shifts, she now had only 3 dinners scheduled. "Frank, there must be a mistake," she said, following him to his small office. "I'm down 4 shifts next week." He didn't look up from his computer. "No mistake. We're overstaffed. But I've worked those shifts for over a year. I need those hours." Panic edged into her voice. Frank finally glanced up, his expression indifferent. Jessica needs more hours if she's going to make rent. She asked, and I adjusted. Jessica lives with her parents, Samantha said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. She told everyone last week that she's saving for a spring break trip to Cancun. Not my problem, Morgan. The schedule's final. He turned back to his computer, dismissal clear. Samantha stood frozen, quickly calculating the loss of income and what it would mean. They were already behind on her mother's treatment plan. The neurologist had warned that any interruption in the medication could lead to faster progression of the disease. Walking back to the dining room, she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She couldn't break down. Not here, not now. She had 3 more hours on this shift and tips to earn. She'd figure something out. She always did. As she approached her section, she noticed a new table had been seated, a man in a tailored suit that screamed money and success, and a young girl in a wheelchair. The girl's head was bowed, her long blonde hair partially hiding her face, but Samantha could see the tightness in her small shoulders, the way her hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Other servers were giving the table a wide berth. Samantha had noticed this before, how some staff avoided tables with disabilities, finding them too complicated or time-consuming. The thought made her blood boil. She approached with a genuine smile. "Welcome to the Golden Spoon. I'm Samantha, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The man looked up, his expression guarded but his eyes surprisingly kind. The girl didn't move. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm. "I'm Lucas, and this is my daughter, Emma." Samantha bent slightly to be at eye level with Emma. "It's very nice to meet you, Emma. Can I get you both something to drink while you look at the menu?" For a brief moment, the girl's eyes lifted to meet Samantha's. And in them, Samantha saw something she recognized all too well, the look of someone fighting a battle no one else could see. Little did Samantha know that this seemingly ordinary table would change the course of her life before the night was over. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and clattering silverware. As Samantha approached Lucas and Emma's table with their drinks, she noticed Emma's shoulders tense slightly at the noise. Sensory sensitivity, Samantha thought, remembering her pediatrics rotation. Without drawing attention to it, she positioned herself to shield Emma from the bustling walkway. "Here we go," she said gently, placing a water in front of Lucas and a strawberry lemonade with a bendy straw for Emma. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" Lucas smiled gratefully. "I think we're ready. I'll have the grilled salmon with asparagus." He glanced at Emma, who remained silent, eyes fixed on the table. After a moment, he continued, "And Emma will have the chicken tenders with mashed potatoes, please." "Excellent choices," Samantha replied, writing down their order. She noticed Emma's fingers tracing the laminated children's menu, lingering over a picture of mac and cheese. Samantha knelt beside the wheelchair and spoke directly to Emma. "You know, I think our chef makes the best mac and cheese in the city. It has 3 kinds of cheese and breadcrumbs on top. Would you prefer that instead?" For the first time, Emma looked directly at Samantha, her blue eyes wide with surprise at being addressed so directly. A tiny nod followed. "Mac and cheese it is," Samantha confirmed, jotting down the change. As she stood, she caught Lucas watching her with an unreadable expression. At the kitchen window, Frank intercepted her. "Why are you wasting time with table 7? Jessica's back and complaining that her tables need attention." "I'm handling my section," Samantha replied evenly. "And Jessica was supposed to be gone 20 minutes, not an hour." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Just stop coddling the wheelchair kid and turn your tables faster. We're not a charity." Samantha bit her tongue, her medical training kicking in as she prioritized the needs of the vulnerable person in her care over the urge to tell Frank exactly what she thought of him. "Their orders are in. I'll check my other tables now." As she jiggled her expanded section, Samantha kept an eye on Lucas and Emma. The girl sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap while her father attempted small talk. There was an awkwardness between them, like 2 people who once knew each other well but had become strangers. When their food arrived, Samantha noticed Emma's difficulty with her utensils. Her right hand seemed to struggle with fine motor control, trembling slightly as she tried to grip her fork. "Excuse me," Lucas called quietly as Samantha passed. "Could you?" He gestured helplessly toward Emma, who was becoming visibly frustrated, a forkful of mac and cheese sliding off before reaching her mouth. Without hesitation, Samantha pulled up a chair. "May I join you for a moment, Emma?" she asked, her voice matter-of-fact rather than pitying. Emma nodded, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "You know," Samantha said conversationally, "when I was in medical school, I learned that our bodies are like complicated machines. Sometimes one part needs a tune-up while the other parts work just fine." She gently demonstrated a more stable grip for the fork. "Your brain is working perfectly. It's just that the signals are having trouble reaching your hand right now." Emma looked up, surprised by this straightforward explanation. "You were a doctor?" "Almost," Samantha replied, guiding Emma's hand as they successfully captured a bite of mac and cheese. "I was studying to be a pediatrician." "That's a doctor for kids. Why did you stop?" Emma asked, her voice soft but curious. Something flickered across Lucas's face, surprised at hearing his daughter speak voluntarily. Samantha kept her voice light. "My mom got sick, and she needed me. Sometimes we make different choices than we planned." She helped Emma with another bite, then loosened her support, letting Emma try the modified grip herself. "Look at that. Your brain's already finding new pathways." Emma managed the fork on her own, a small but triumphant smile forming when she successfully took a bite. "I had an accident," she offered suddenly. "That's why I can't walk very well." "Well, you're doing great things with that fork now," Samantha encouraged, standing up. "And I bet you're good at lots of other things too." "I can draw," Emma ventured. "But only with my left hand now." "That's impressive," Samantha said sincerely. "Most people can't draw with either hand." From across the dining room, Samantha caught Frank's glare burning into her back. She'd spent too long at one table. "I need to check on my other guests, but I'll be back soon." "Enjoy your mac and cheese, Artist Emma." As she walked away, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks, Emma's laugh, a light, musical sound that caused several nearby diners to smile reflexively. Lucas caught Samantha's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." His expression transformed by something that looked remarkably like hope. Throughout their meal, Samantha returned whenever she could, each time engaging Emma directly. By dessert, the girl was animated, telling Samantha about her art teacher who visited her at home since she couldn't attend regular school yet. When Lucas requested the check, Samantha brought it promptly along with a small packet of crayons and a golden spoon coloring page for Emma. On the house, she explained with a wink to Emma. Lucas handed her a credit card without looking at the bill. As Samantha processed the payment, she noticed the name, Lucas Bennett. Something about it seemed familiar, but she couldn't place it. When she returned with his card, Lucas handed her a folded bill. "Emma, and I would like you to have this. You've made what could have been a difficult evening into something special." "Just doing my job," Samantha replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. What she'd done went far beyond her job description. As they prepared to leave, Emma looked up at Samantha. "Will you be here if we come back tomorrow?" Before Samantha could answer, Frank appeared beside her. "Samantha, I need to see you in my office now." Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed the manager's tone. "I'm just finishing up with my customers," Samantha replied professionally. Frank's smile was tight. "Immediately. Samantha, Jessica can handle the rest." As Samantha reluctantly followed Frank, she glanced back to see Lucas watching thoughtfully, his expression no longer that of a grateful customer but of a man making calculations. "Close the door," Frank ordered as Samantha entered his cramped office. The space smelled of stale coffee and cheap cologne, made claustrophobic by piles of invoices and scheduling sheets. Samantha remained standing, her back straight despite her exhaustion. "Is there a problem?" Frank leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You tell me. I just watched you waste 30 minutes on one table when you have 7 others waiting." "I wasn't neglecting anyone," Samantha defended. What that child needed isn't our concern," Frank cut in. "This is a restaurant, not a therapy center. I'm making a note in your file." Samantha's hands clenched at her sides. For helping a disabled guest? For time management issues, Frank countered. And since we're discussing your performance, I'm cutting you to 2 shifts next week. 1 dinner, 1 lunch. The room seemed to tilt beneath Samantha's feet. 2 shifts, Frank? That's not even enough to cover my gas to get here. You know my situation. Your mother's medical bills aren't the Golden Spoon's responsibility. His voice hardened. Jessica is younger, more attractive to customers, and doesn't spend half her shift playing nurse. She gets your shifts. Samantha fought to keep her voice steady. This is wrong, and you know it. Complaint noted. Frank opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. Here's your cut of tonight's tips. We had to adjust the pool since Jessica covered extra tables. The envelope felt suspiciously light in Samantha's hand. Without opening it, she knew it would be far less than she'd earned. I'll see you Tuesday for lunch shift, Frank said, already turning to his computer. Don't be late. Outside in the parking lot, Samantha leaned against her decade-old Honda and finally opened the envelope, $43 for a 10-hour shift where she'd earned well over $100 in tips. Tears of frustration burned her eyes, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't pay for her mother's medication. 20 minutes later, Samantha quietly entered their small apartment. The night light in the hallway cast a soft glow, enough for her to see her way to her mother's bedroom. She peeked in, relieved to find Eleanor Morgan sleeping peacefully, her medication schedule chart neatly marked on the bedside table. In the kitchen, Samantha dropped her keys on the counter and slumped into a chair. A stack of bills sat beneath a refrigerator magnet, the electric company's final notice on top, followed by the pharmacy statement showing her mother's MS medication was ready for pickup. $800 after insurance, money she no longer had. Her phone buzzed with a text from their neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Eleanor had a good day. Ate all dinner. No tremors. Left soup in fridge for you. A small kindness that brought fresh tears to Samantha's eyes. Mrs. Chen checked on Eleanor during Samantha's long shifts, refusing payment beyond the occasional bag of groceries Samantha could afford to share. Without her help, Samantha couldn't work at all. Exhausted, she opened her laptop to search for additional job openings. The browser was still open to the medical school portal she sometimes visited, torturing herself with what might have been. Her student account remained active, the university's gesture of goodwill when she'd withdrawn, allowing her the theoretical possibility of returning if her circumstances changed. A notification bubble showed an unread message from Dr. Winters, her former pediatrics advisor. Curious, Samantha clicked it. Samantha, a prestigious research position has opened in our pediatric neurology department. Despite your absence, your name still comes up when we discuss exceptional students. The deadline has passed, but I've convinced the committee to review a late application from you. It includes full tuition remission and a stipend. Call me. Dr. Winters. The message was dated 3 weeks ago. Samantha's heart raced as she scrolled through her missed emails. There it was, the formal announcement with application instructions. The deadline had been yesterday. She typed a desperate reply to Dr. Winters, explaining her situation and begging for an extension, then closed the laptop. Even if granted, how could she return to school? Her mother needed full-time care that no stipend could cover. Samantha was still sitting at the kitchen table when dawn broke, her mind circling through impossible scenarios. Her phone alarm chimed, reminding her of her mother's morning medication. As she measured the pills into a small cup, a knock at the door startled her. No one visited at 6 a.m. Warily, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. A courier stood outside, holding an envelope. Samantha Morgan, he confirmed when she opened the door. Yes? Delivery requiring signature. He thrust a clipboard at her, then handed over a heavy, cream-colored envelope once she'd signed. Bewildered, Samantha examined the envelope. The return address simply read Bennett Enterprises with a downtown office location. The paper was expensive, the kind used for wedding invitations or legal documents. Inside was a single sheet of heavyweight stationery and a business card. The card read Lucas Bennett, CEO, Bennett Restaurant Group. Beneath the company logo was a handwritten note, "The Golden Spoon is one of mine." Samantha's knees weakened as realization dawned. Lucas Bennett wasn't just any customer. He owned the restaurant. He was Frank's boss. Her eyes flew to the letter. Ms. Morgan, your kindness to my daughter Emma last night was extraordinary. In our brief interaction, you demonstrated more compassion, intelligence, and professional skill than I've seen in many with far more impressive titles. I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. My car will arrive at your address at 9 a.m. to bring you to my office, should you choose to accept my invitation. The driver will wait no longer than 10 minutes. Emma asks that you consider it carefully. She has questions about her brain pathways that only a former medical student might answer properly. Respectfully, Lucas Bennett. Samantha's hand trembled as she reread the letter. How had he found her address? What did he want? And most importantly, why did fate keep dangling possibilities she couldn't possibly grasp? Eleanor called weakly from the bedroom, needing help to start her day. At precisely 9 a.m., a sleek black town car pulled up outside Samantha's apartment building. After securing a reluctant promise from Mrs. Chin to stay with her mother for a few hours, Samantha had changed 3 times, finally settling on her only interview outfit, a navy blue blazer over a simple blouse and slacks. The ensemble was slightly outdated but professional, a relic from her medical school admission interviews. The driver, a composed woman in a tailored uniform, opened the door without a word as Samantha slid into the plush leather seat. Anxiety tightened her chest. Was this about Frank? Had Lucas Bennett somehow discovered her past? Or worse, was this some elaborate setup to accuse her of something? Downtown skyscrapers loomed ahead as they approached the business district. The car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a gleaming tower bearing the discreet logo of Bennett Enterprises. Samantha's stomach dropped as they descended into the shadowy space. She was so far from her comfort zone that she might as well have landed on another planet. Morgan, the driver said, finally breaking her silence. Mr. Bennett is waiting on the 40th floor. The elevator requires a security key, which I've been instructed to provide. She handed Samantha a small plastic card. He said you should take your time. There's no rush. The private elevator whisked Samantha upward at a speed that made her ears pop. When the doors opened, she found herself in a minimalist reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A young man at the desk looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Morgan, welcome. Mr. Bennett is expecting you in the main conference room. He gestured down a hallway. Second door on the right. The conference room door was ajar. Samantha knocked tentatively before stepping inside. Her breath caught at the unexpected sight before her. Instead of a formal business meeting, she found herself looking at Emma, seated in her wheelchair beside a small table set for 3 with what appeared to be breakfast pastries and a tea service. The girl's face lit up. You came? Emma exclaimed with more animation than Samantha had seen the previous night. Dad said you might be too busy. I'm glad I wasn't too busy, Samantha replied, momentarily forgetting her nervousness in the face of Emma's delight. Where is your father? Dealing with a problem, Emma said cryptically, reaching for a chocolate croissant. He said to start without him and that you should eat because adults forget to sometimes. She pushed the pastry plate towards Samantha. The raspberry ones are really good. Samantha sat, charmed by the girl's unexpected poise. In the daylight, she could see Emma's features more clearly, intelligent eyes that reminded her of Lucas and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of inner strength. How did you know where I live? Samantha asked gently. Emma shrugged. Dad knows lots of things. He says information is as valuable as money. She took a bite of her croissant, then added, he looked sad when he came back from his office last night. He was on the phone for hours. Before Samantha could probe further, the door opened, and Lucas entered. The businessman who stood before her was markedly different from the restaurant patron. His tailored suit and commanding presence filled the room, though his expression softened when he looked at his daughter. I see Emma's playing host, he said, his voice warm. I apologize for keeping you waiting, Miss Morgan. An urgent matter at the Golden Spoon required my attention. Something in his tone sent a chill through Samantha. Mr. Bennett, why am I here? If this is about last night, it is and it isn't, Lucas interrupted, taking a seat. Emma, would you mind if Ms. Angela takes you to see the Model City display on the 38th floor? We'll join you shortly. Emma looked between them, clearly reluctant to leave. Are you going to offer her the job? Lucas gave his daughter a look that was half exasperation, half affection. We discussed this, Emma. Adult conversations first. A young woman appeared at the door, and Emma reluctantly went with her, throwing one last glance at Samantha that held equal parts hope and conspiracy. When they were alone, Lucas's demeanor changed, becoming more businesslike. I've owned the Golden Spoon for approximately 6 months, Ms. Morgan. It was part of a larger acquisition, and frankly, I hadn't paid it much attention until recent reports of declining revenue and customer satisfaction. Samantha shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Bennett, I don't understand what this has to do with me. Everything. Lucas slid a folder across the table. Last night was my first visit as a customer rather than an owner. What I witnessed was unacceptable. Not your service, which was exceptional, but the management. Samantha opened the folder to find financial statements, employee records, and what appeared to be her own personnel file. Her blood ran cold when she saw the discrepancies between reported tips and actual distributions. Frank has been skimming tips for at least 4 months, Lucas continued, and selectively targeting certain employees, you, primarily. Last night, after you left, I had my team audit the books. The findings were illuminating. The restaurant door swung open with a crash, revealing Frank, his face mottled with rage. Behind him stood Lucas's assistant, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. He insisted on coming up when he heard, you set me up. Frank shouted, pointing at Samantha. You and your little crippled accomplice. Lucas rose slowly, his expression dangerously calm. Mr. Peterson, you are addressing my daughter and a valued employee. Choose your next words very carefully. Frank faltered, finally registering the luxurious surroundings and Lucas's authoritative presence. You can't you don't understand how these places work. The tip system is complex. Is stealing complex? Lucas asked quietly. Is falsifying time cards complex? Or perhaps you'd like to explain the complexity of scheduling discrimination. The color drained from Frank's face as Lucas picked up a document from the table. As of this morning, you are no longer employed by any Bennett enterprise. Security will escort you from the building after you surrender your keys and access cards. Samantha watched in stunned silence as Frank was led away, his protests fading down the hallway. When the door closed again, Lucas turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Now, Ms. Morgan, or should I say former medical student Samantha Morgan, let's discuss your future. Samantha froze, her fingers still resting on the evidence of Frank's theft. How do you know about medical school? Lucas's expression softened slightly. After what I witnessed between you and Emma, I had my team do some research. Your approach was too knowledgeable, too clinical yet compassionate, to be something you picked up serving tables. He said again, gesturing for Samantha to do the same. You were in your second year at Monroe Medical, specializing in pediatrics, top 15% of your class, recipient of the Hightower Scholarship for Emerging Medical Talent, and specifically praised for your work with children with neurological conditions. Hearing her past recited so matter-of-factly made Samantha's chest ache. That was another lifetime. 3 years, 7 months, Lucas corrected gently. Not quite a lifetime. Your withdrawal coincided with your mother's MS diagnosis. The precision of his knowledge was unsettling. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your handling of Frank, but I'm uncomfortable with how much you've investigated my personal life. Fair enough, Lucas nodded, respecting her boundary. Let me be direct then. I'm offering you a job, Miss Morgan. Several, actually, depending on what you want. Samantha's weariness was tempered by curiosity. What kind of job? First option, general manager of the Golden Spoon. Effective immediately. Salary triple what you were making, plus benefits, including comprehensive health insurance that would cover your mother. The amount he named made Samantha's heart skip. It would cover the rent, the medical bills, everything, with room to breathe for the first time in years. Second option, Lucas continued, is a position within Bennett Enterprises' Community Health Initiative. We fund medical services in underserved areas. The role would utilize your medical background and pay significantly more than the restaurant position. Samantha's mind raced. Why would you offer either to someone you barely know? Because in 15 minutes with my daughter, you did something no specialist, therapist, or tutor has managed in the 18 months since the accident. His composed facade cracked slightly. Emma talked to you. She smiled. She let you help her without shame or frustration. Samantha glanced at the door where Emma had exited. The accident, was her mother involved? Pain flashed across Lucas's face. Car accident. Catherine, my wife, was killed instantly. Emma's spinal cord was damaged, resulting in partial paralysis and neurological complications affecting her right side. The physical injuries are healing, but the emotional trauma, he trailed off, then straightened. Until last night, she hasn't willingly spoken to anyone outside our home since it happened. I'm so sorry, Samantha said softly. Emma is an extraordinary girl. She is, Lucas agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Which brings me to the third option. He slid another folder across the table. This one is more complicated. Inside was an acceptance letter to Monroe Medical School's reentry program, dated today, along with documentation for a full scholarship and living stipend. Paperclipped to it was a business card for Dr. Winters, her former advisor. How did you, Samantha began. Dr. Winters and I serve on a children's hospital board together, Lucas explained. When I described your interaction with Emma, she immediately knew who you were. The scholarship opportunity she mentioned in her email is still available. One call from me, and it's yours. Samantha's hands trembled as she touched the acceptance letter. This isn't possible. My mother needs full-time care. Which leads to the final component, Lucas said, opening a third folder. Bennett Enterprises maintains several fully accessible apartments for executives with medical needs or disabilities. One is available in your mother's name, along with home health care coverage through our corporate insurance. Tears blurred Samantha's vision as the impossibility of what he offered sank in. Why would you do all this for a stranger? Lucas was quiet for a moment. After Catherine died, I focused on work, on accruing more wealth, more companies, as if success could fill the void she left. Meanwhile, Emma retreated further into silence, and I had no idea how to reach her. His eyes met Samantha's. Last night, I saw my daughter laugh for the first time in 18 months. You gave me that gift without even knowing who I was. He leaned forward. This isn't charity, Miss Morgan. The medical community lost someone exceptional when circumstances forced you out. And selfishly, I'm hoping you'll continue to be part of Emma's life in whatever capacity you choose. Samantha stood abruptly, overwhelmed. I need a moment. Of course, Lucas nodded toward a door. The balcony is private. Outside in the crisp morning air, 40 stories above the city, Samantha tried to process everything. The offer was beyond generous. It was life-altering. Yet something didn't sit right. Was this just a wealthy man throwing money at a problem, using her to help his daughter? And what strings might be attached that weren't visible yet? When she returned inside, her decision made, she found Emma had rejoined her father. The girl's face lit up. Are you going to be my doctor someday? Samantha looked at Lucas, who raised his hands. She guessed. Apparently, she's been Googling medical schools on my tablet. Smart and resourceful, Samantha observed with a small smile. She took a deep breath and addressed Lucas. Before I give you my answer, I need to be absolutely clear about something. Lucas nodded seriously. Go ahead. If I accept your help returning to medical school, it has to be because I've earned it, not because you're buying a friend for Emma or a doctor for your family. The words came out more bluntly than she'd intended. Instead of offense, Lucas looked relieved. I wouldn't want it any other way. And my mother's care can't be contingent on any personal relationship with your family. The offer stands regardless of your relationship with us, Lucas confirmed. Though Emma would be disappointed. The girl nodded emphatically. Very disappointed. Samantha knelt beside Emma's wheelchair. In that case, I think I might know a medical student who would be happy to explain brain pathways to you. Maybe even regularly. Emma's smile was answer enough. 1 year later, the lecture hall buzzed with conversation as students filed in for advanced pediatric neurology. Samantha settled into her seat in the front row, arranging her color-coded notes and tablet with practiced efficiency. Her white coat, still crisp despite daily wear, bore the Monroe medical emblem she'd once thought she'd never see again. "Dr. Saunders is brutal with pop quizzes," whispered Lydia, her study partner, sliding into the adjacent seat. "Did you review the cerebellar development cases?" Until 2 a.m., Samantha confirmed, stifling a yawn. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Doing water therapy with Nurse Rachel today. Feeling stronger. Dinner at your place tonight. Emma requested my apple cobbler." Samantha smiled, typing a quick affirmative response. In the years since Lucas Bennett's offer had transformed her life, the most unexpected development wasn't her return to medical studies or her mother's improved condition under comprehensive care. It was the unlikely family they'd formed. Eleanor's accessible apartment was in the same building as Lucas and Emma's penthouse. What began as occasional shared meals had evolved into regular Sunday dinners, movie nights, and a maternal bond between Eleanor and Emma that filled gaps in both their lives. Lesson and message, 0:58 to 1 o'clock, 240 words. Ms. Morgan, Dr. Winters appeared beside her desk, interrupting her thoughts. "A moment after class?" Samantha nodded, wondering if there was an issue with her recent research paper on pediatric stroke rehabilitation, a topic inspired by her work with Emma. When the lecture ended 90 minutes later, Dr. Winters guided Samantha to her office, where a familiar face waited, Lucas. Samantha hadn't expected to see him until their scheduled dinner that evening. "Is everything okay with Emma?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "Better than fine, actually. That's why I'm here." Dr. Winters beamed as she closed the door. "Mr. Bennett has some news that impacts your academic trajectory. I'll let him explain." Lucas looked uncharacteristically nervous. "The Children's Rehabilitation Center we discussed is becoming a reality. The board approved final funding yesterday." He handed Samantha a thick prospectus embossed with the Bennett Foundation logo. "The Emma Bennett Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation will open 18 months from now, adjacent to Monroe Medical." Samantha flipped through the glossy pages, her heart racing. The center was Lucas's passion project, a state-of-the-art facility specializing in integrative care for children with neuromuscular conditions. What had begun as a hypothetical discussion during one of their long talks had gradually transformed into architectural renderings and treatment protocols. "It's really happening," she breathed, pausing at an image of a sun-filled therapy room designed with Emma's input. "But why are you telling me here, with Dr. Winters?" Lucas exchanged glances with the professor before continuing. "The center will need a medical director after your residency. Someone who understands both the clinical and personal aspects of rehabilitation." "You want me to—" Samantha couldn't finish the sentence. "We want to create a specialized track for your remaining studies," Dr. Winters explained. "Additional certifications in rehabilitation medicine, administrative rotations, research opportunities, all tailored toward preparing you for the role." "This is a lot," Samantha managed, overwhelmed by the implication. "I'm not even through med school yet." "The center won't open for 18 months, and you wouldn't step into the director role until after your residency," Lucas clarified. "We're planning for the future. Your future, if you want it." The magnitude of his continued investment in her career left Samantha momentarily speechless. A year ago, she'd been worried about making rent. Now she was being groomed for a position most physicians work decades to achieve. "There's one more thing," Lucas added, his expression softening. "Emma asked me to give you this." He handed Samantha a carefully folded drawing. She opened it to find a childish yet detailed rendering of 3 figures standing before a large building labeled Emma's Hospital. The figures were labeled Dad, Sam, and Emma, their stick hands connected in a row. Below the drawing, in Emma's improving handwriting, were the words, "My family fixed me. Now we can fix other kids too."